Welcome to Garden Valley Church Podcasts. We are so looking forward to having you join us today.
Well, hi guys. Welcome to the Youth Culture Podcast. Hi guys, welcome back to the Youth Culture Podcast. I'm here with Emily Lowery, who was Emily Carter when I was a kid, and it's amazing because she was one of my youth leaders as a teenager. And so I thought it would be just a really fun conversation. Today we're going to be talking about going after your dreams, going after your passions, and really unlocking the dream that God has placed inside each of us and how that evolves and changes over time. And so I'm very excited for this conversation. I'm going to let Emily kind of take it from here, but it's going to be a great time.
Hi, I'm Emily. I'm actually the marketing director here at Garden Valley Church now. Obviously, have kind of shifted and evolved from youth pastoring and youth ministry, which was not in my plan. It was actually not the dream that was placed inside of me. So unsurprisingly, God has different plans for us than what we lay out in our lives, which has basically just been my life in a nutshell. Nothing went as planned, and I'm a big planner. For those of you that know me, know that I literally carry a paper planner with me everywhere I go. It's off to the side somewhere as we speak.
It's true.
Part of it is I double booked myself a number of times in youth ministry. Brandon was, he had to deal with that a couple different times before I finally was like, I needed a better plan. Yeah, but also God very clearly kind of said, this isn't going to go as what you anticipated. So you need to start writing things down so you can keep track of what your story is.
Absolutely.
So I grew up in church. My mom is actually the administrative pastor here at Garden Valley, Nancy Carter. My dad spent years doing sound ministry, worship team, kind of a number of different things, men's ministry. His name is John Carter. You'll actually see him on one of the podcast episodes as well, talking about generational youth ministry. Which that one I'm super excited about as well.
It'll be a fun topic.
Yes, definitely. So, but obviously I grew up in church. So obviously my life would go as planned. My passions would be very clearly laid out and be ministry centric. Right. They very much weren't. I grew up really, really, really wanting to write and wanting to help people. That led me to obviously go to college, because that's a thing that people do nowadays. So I left Roseburg, went up to Western Oregon University, did a double major in English literature and psychology, with the goal of getting my bachelor's in English lit, and going on to finish out my doctorate in psychology and be a practicing psychologist.
Lots of amazing, amazing accomplishments.
Yes.
It's awesome.
Clearly I didn't do that. So now I'm 31 years old. I obviously did some college, left, came back home, did not finish my bachelor's even. Ended up getting pregnant at 19, having my son at 20. Got pregnant at 20? Anyways, I got pregnant right around there. Have an amazing 12-year-old now. He is in Brandon's youth group now, which is just mind-blowing for me to think of, because like Brandon saw him little like held him during youth group.
Yeah, exactly.
And my life kind of went haywire from there. Like clearly nothing went as planned. I did an internship here at Garden Valley Church right after Isaiah was born. That's my son. And things kind of took off from there. Very clearly, like God put a dream in my heart that was youth ministry centric at that point. And that was where my passion laid. And it was very God driven. Like I didn't anticipate it. If you talk with the directors of the internship at that time, I was pretty resistant to it. I spent about 6 months really fighting against going into youth ministry because I felt like I wasn't in a place to do that. I wasn't qualified. I was in the middle of a giant custody battle with my son's dad, and it was turbulent to say the least, which is a whole different testimony because now like we co-parent together like bosses,
right,
and his new wife is quite literally my best friend. Which at 19, 20, 21, I would have been like, there's absolutely like zero chance that this is ever going to happen. Like, we're going to have to go through attorneys for everything. Yeah. And God just really kept pressing in on me, which, to be fair, I gave him full license to do. I was very blunt and open and honest with Matthew and Sabrina, and the fact, like, I wanted God to tear my heart open for what he wanted me to do. And the passions and the things that he wanted to place in me, and the things that really were on his heart and made his heart hurt and made him cry. Mm-hmm. And for me, for who I was, that very clearly was youth ministry. My parents were youth pastors for a number of years back in the day. My dad, actually, when he thinks about it, he can't really pinpoint when it was. So we kind of narrowed it down to it was before I was born and as I was a baby. So that obviously is generational in my family. Right. But it was never anything that I imagined happen until the current youth pastor at the time approached me and was like, hey, like this. And he was part of the internship team as well. Mm-hmm. But he approached me and was like, hey, this very clearly is something that you're passionate about. Do you want to join the team? And I was like, no. Awesome. And he just kept working on me and ebbing me and easing me into it in different ways that I didn't even realize that's what he was doing until finally I approached him. I was like, hey, yeah, I think I need to do this. Like, I need it to be really casual. That lasted all of, I think, maybe 2 months. Oh, wow. And then I was like all in, super, super involved. And then by the end of summer, because I joined in like April, May time span, by the end of summer, he and his wife had stepped out of youth ministry. Oh, wow. And we had a new youth pastor step in. I stayed on the team, and it just ushered in a new season, and things evolved from there. And I stayed in youth ministry for a number of years. Like, I think my last year, I believe, was Brandon's last year.
I think so.
So my last year was 2017. Right at the beginning of 2017, I stepped out. I transitioned out. At the time, Wendy Konopowski, our awesome pastor, yes, and pastor's wife,
we love her.
Is a great heart of this. She obviously, I don't know if Brandon's mentioned her yet, but she was a huge inspiration and mentor in Brandon's life. Absolutely. And myself as well. She's still one of my closest friends. Her husband is our executive pastor here. He's one of my closest friends, and obviously my boss. But I transitioned out. It was really hard for Wendy and I, like, when I talked with her about it, because I got married that previous year, and my life was going in a different trajectory, and I was trying to change careers. I'd been in insurance the entire time I'd been in youth ministry. I was really involved in youth ministry. I was spending a huge amount of hours with the teens, and I was very, very stressed in the career I was in. It very clearly was not the dream that God placed in me. It was not remotely a passion. And it was very draining. And my husband was like, we need to go ahead and kind of shift this. Like, obviously, you can't just quit your job. Crazy, I know. How dare he not let me just quit? But he was like, obviously, you can't quit. So let's reevaluate and figure out what things we can start pulling off of the plate in this new season.
Absolutely.
One of them ended up being youth ministry. And it was devastating and horrible. And I cried a lot. And Wendy and I cried a lot. And there were a couple of times where Wendy tried to ease me back in. And I didn't feel God putting it on me to say, yes, this is the time to step back in.
Right.
And it was hard because it was like, that was my future plans. Like, Wendy's and my initial plan had been me stepping into the role that Brandon's now in. Mm-hmm. Very clearly, I did not. We have this awesome youth pastor here. He's rocking it, and really connecting with the teens in a way that I don't know that I could.
I think on top of that, too, you taught me a lot about connecting with teens, and you were there for me through some really, really dark times, really hard times, just as Wendy was. And I think being able to lead the youth in that way, a lot of that is kudos to you because of just that relationship and connection.
Yeah, and I think from the start, I was very big on vulnerability. I'd spent obviously my entire life in the church. I'd seen a variety of different things, but I had also had executive pastors that were very clear in leading from what you're walking through.
Yeah, right.
And just being very transparent. Like my mom was on staff at the church I grew up on. She obviously is on staff here, but it was very transparent. Like I saw and heard things that I probably shouldn't have seen and heard because I was in the church, and I was in the church in the middle of the week. But it's always been a big thing that now, like, I had a kid. Like, yeah. I wanted to be very transparent about, like, you don't have to do things perfect. You don't have to be perfect to still walk out in ministry.
Right.
And that was obviously a big thing with my ministry with the youth is like, hey, like, you guys are going to make mistakes. You guys are going to screw up. Like, you guys are probably going to fall flat on your face, to be completely honest. And it's very different for each teen. Some rock it and just go through and do really great in high school, go into college or go into a ministry school, and shift right into something and don't really have any of those same kind of struggles. But I think the reality is that, especially in culture today, in the world today, that's a very, very small minority.
Yeah,
that's a
absolutely.
percentage of a percentage. So, and I didn't want kids thinking like, hey, like, youth leaders, we have it all solved. Like, I was still walking through a bunch of crap.
Yeah.
I had custody stuff going on. I had friends that I was super close with growing up that were going through these crazy, insane things that, like, to me, that was my family. Like, they were my family. They are my family to a certain degree still. But they were going through some intense things it was turbulent for me spiritually and emotionally, and I didn't want to hide it from the teens.
Right. Absolutely.
And I didn't really hide it from the teens when I left that, like, this was hard. Like, I couldn't come up and visit the teens. Like, it was way too hard for me. Yeah. Obviously, I transitioned away from insurance. I did not transition here. When my husband, Donovan, and I sat down and were really talking about, like, okay, what is it that I want to apply for? Because I had a secure job. Like, I was working for a family friend. Like, I was still doing really good in the position that I was in. So it wasn't a necessity for me to find something. So our big thing was I really wanted to find something that lit the passion in my heart, that kind of walked the dream out that God had given me. I still didn't feel led to go back into traditional youth ministry as what we think of it as a church.
Right. Yeah.
And that was really hard for me. Not that I think the church could have paid me to do something like that at that point. But I probably wouldn't have been quite as overwhelmed doing insurance if I was still walking in what I really felt my heart was still in.
Yeah.
So I applied for a number of different things. Some of them, because I was pregnant with my first daughter, not my first child. I was pregnant with my first child of my husband's, but my first daughter, my second child, Harper at the time. And I remember going through and calling Pastor Craig, or I think I called my mom, and I think she was in with Pastor Craig. But I was bawling hysterically.
Uh-oh.
I'd stayed home sick, something like the equivalent of an insurance explosion without it actually being an explosion had happened. And I was homesick. Like, I was super sick. I don't take sick days. That's not really a big thing. I try to do it now, to be very conscientious of myself. I'm not good at it. But I remember calling and just bawling hysterically, and Pastor Craig being on the phone and saying, okay, this is clearly a season you need to step out of this. And he was like, and that may look like you stepping into a job that isn't your passion to get to where you want to be.
You got to taste things.
Yes. And I remember, well, being devastated and also being kind of mad at him. Like, what pastor tells you, like, don't go into your passion, don't go into where your heart is at.
Right.
But he could see very clearly what I couldn't, because I was super pregnant and I was super emotional. Sure. And I was in what was my equivalent of a very toxic environment for where I was at in my life. And I needed to step out in order to get a clear perspective. I did not. I stayed at that particular organization for probably another 6 to 9 months. And I love them. Like, I still have my insurance with them. I harbor no ill will towards them whatsoever. Like, I've had some amazing conversations with them since then, and some really transparent conversations. Because there was a lot of pressure, I think, that was placed on me, not necessarily by fault of the owner.
Sure.
But just by, I'd been there almost a decade, and
Yeah.
I'd started there when I was super young, like I was 19, 20. And I just grew and evolved in that position. And it was my first real career job. Like, I didn't know how to communicate to her that this was way too much. And so I stayed. I was trying to be super strategic. I was trying to be very proactive in what I was doing. Spoiler, don't do that. If God is calling you out, step out. He has something for you.
Come on. That's really good.
I got offered a position right before I had Harper by another person in our church. And I prayed super hard into it because it was like, this is going to sound cocky, but way below the level of my expertise. Like, really easy. It was, to a certain degree, like, it was a general receptionist job with some different things that can be added on as things evolved and you learned the job. And my husband was like, in this season, like, that would probably be amazing for you to just be able to kind of just put yourself in cruise control. Yeah. And I was like, but that's not who I am. Like, I don't want to do this. I was like, I also don't want to do this for 6 months and then tell someone that we know, oh, hey, I'm not fully fulfilled here. I want to leave.
Yeah.
So I turned that down. I applied at the police department. I applied at a number of different places, a real estate office, a few different other places before I finally landed at a youth homeless shelter and interviewed there.
Yes.
And just walked in. It was chaos. Like, there's youth shelter chaos. If any of you have done youth ministry, which I imagine a lot of people that are listening to this have probably done youth ministry. But if you've walked into youth ministry, there's like youth ministry chaos. Like, it's to a certain degree organized chaos. Like, you know what's going on and the kids are chaotic. This was a whole different level. They'd gone through a huge amount of administration changes and almost the entire staff had fully turned over. Yeah. And I just remember the new executive director, like, she'd been there maybe 2 or 3 weeks, walking me through and kind of talking to me about where the place had been and what they were wanting to bring it into. And just having my heart light up and that passion bubble inside of me. And I walked out. I texted the person that had recommended me for the job and said, I don't know what it's going to take to get this. I want this job. I was like, these are my requirements, which was basically, don't try to make me do sales. It's a youth homeless shelter. They're not going to make you do sales. I was like, and match what I'm currently making, which was very feasible. Mm-hmm. It was very feasible for just about anybody. Because I had the hourly plus commission, but I wasn't worried about the commission piece because of how the structure was set up. And I think it was like the next day she let me know that I got it.
Wow.
And I was just ecstatic and terrified. Like, if anyone's put notice in on a job, it's terrifying, even if it's a good situation. And this was a good situation. Like, Natalie knew that I wasn't super thrilled with where I was at. And I'd been honest to a certain degree over the years that I wasn't planning on staying for 20, 30, 40 years. Like, I was not going to stay through retirement.
But through a season.
Yes, through a season, yes. And I'd been strategic the previous 4 months in making sure that I was writing down everything I could think of, policy and procedure-wise. So when I transitioned out, it was as smooth as I could make it.
Right.
I dove into that particular organization, Casa de Belen, and then it went through like 8 seasons the next 2 years.
Yeah, right.
It was incredible, insane, amazing, but it also did not leave me with time to do any kind of actual ministry whatsoever.
Yeah.
I didn't see the teens. I didn't get to go down and see Brandon when he was in Reading. And it didn't, like, it was fulfilling, but it wasn't my passion. And God had very clearly put a passion on my heart to do some kind of ministry. And for those of you that have worked in nonprofit that have state or federal grants, there's a lot of limitations on what you can do in the religious atmosphere and what you can and can't say.
So where did you find the difference in your passion, in the passion like evolving and changing in that process with CASA to now?
You know, I think that we were sitting down. I'd been there 5-6 months. I was sitting down with a different executive director than I started there with. Whole different other story. But I was sitting down with that executive director, and she was telling kind of the core group of us, like, hey, like where we are at, we don't have the policies and procedures in place that we need. Nothing's organized. We can't really do anything. This can't function to where it needs to be. We need to shut down for a season. And I remember being terrified because these are kids that at this point had become my kids. Like,
right, absolutely.
These were my kids.
Did life with them.
I was there 40 hours a week with them. I say 40, it was more like 60. Most of them had my cell phone number. Like, they would text me random things when I wasn't on shift. I would stop by and say hi when I was running errands. Like, they knew my kids. They knew my husband. Like, it was insane. It felt insane. And I remember then going into this season where we laid off most of the staff. I was one of the staff that stayed on. And being in this building that was 27,000 square feet that is supposed to be housing homeless youth. And there was 4 of us working. Like, if you've worked in a building that large, only having 4 people there is, well, terrifying, because you're never really sure if there's noises because of one of your coworkers, or if it's noises because there's an animal that got in, or if there's noises because a person got in, or if there's noises for a whole different spiritual reason.
I was waiting for it.
Yeah. And it was crazy insane. And it ended up evolving into a fairly toxic culture. And I remember just sitting there and calling up the pastor that I grew up with, who is an insane spiritual father, an insane spiritual powerhouse, and going,
Yes, he is.
and just saying, there is something in this building. I'm an employee. I can't do anything about it. We have state grants. I can't do anything about it. I was like, but I am willing to 100% violate policy because we don't have youth in here and accidentally let a group of people in that will go through and pray over this place.
Yep. That summer was very interesting.
It was, I stayed on, we reopened in November. I was there until the end of April.
Yeah.
So I stayed on for a ways after we reopened, but it was, looking back, they didn't get everything out. No fault of theirs. There was a lot in that building.
Yeah, there was.
And it was draining me. And I remember not stepping out. I got fired. First time I've ever got fired in my life. I didn't see it coming. It ended up being unjust. She wouldn't let me back in to say goodbye to the kids. The kids didn't understand what was going on. I didn't understand what was going on. One of my closest friends was the case manager there. She'll come on another episode. But I remember for 6 weeks laying on my couch, bawling hysterically. Almost the entire 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Until Wendy bullied me into applying for a job.
Bullied me.
100% bullied me. Because it was in the middle of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
You weren't required to apply for jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And I literally, like, I had just found out I was pregnant with my 3rd child. And I remember just being like, I can't be a stay-at-home mom. I want my kids back.
Yeah, right.
Like, I want my kids back.
Sorry.
And just bawling constantly. Yeah. So no, Wendy like 100% bullied me.
She's so good at that.
I'm pretty sure she would have submitted the job application for me if I hadn't done it.
Hilarious.
And just coming out of that season of this intense, unexplainable grief of what to me felt like this was a dream dying.
Yes.
Like, for me, this was very much... I'm not going to cry.
You're okay.
I put mascara on. I'm not going to cry. This was very much a season, and I think God very strategically led me to CASA to a certain degree to have this finality and closure in what I was doing with youth ministry.
Right.
Not that I didn't have closure leaving Garden Valley's youth program. Not that I didn't have closure in seeing all of these amazing things that these kids in youth ministry that I worked with have done over the years. But shifting this perspective of this is my future, this is my passion, this is my dream, because I'd invested and prayed so much into this that I wasn't willing to let it go. God very clearly was like, hey, this is a new season. This is a new section of your life. It's not just a new chapter.
That's so good.
It's a new section of your life.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, I think, they have these dreams that they get when they're teens, when they're young adults. And there's this grand assumption that these are dreams that you're going to have and passions you're going to walk out for the next 50, 60, 70 years. And we talk about seasons in church. We never really talk about how dreams and passions can go through seasons.
Yes.
And I think that was very much a season for me. It was very much this closure of, like, I still now, CASA has shut down. I have talked with the board. They've formally let me know, like, I'm no longer bound by the policy and procedure of not addressing the youth in public. I'm no longer bound of the policy and procedure of no longer friending them on Facebook or contacting them through the phone. Like, I'm no longer bound by the non-disclosure. Hallelujah. Yeah, I can say all of the chaos that happened that should never have happened. But it's just this closure where I'm like, I feel released.
Yeah.
To move on to something new, which I never. So I've done marketing. I've done primarily digital marketing for about 5 or 6 years on the side, solely for organizations that I love, primarily here at the church as a volunteer, and then as just paid to manage their social media. And I've done it little bits and pieces in other places as well, just as they needed it to get things going. Mm-hmm. If you had asked me, and I'm sure people did, I never anticipated doing this full time, ever in my life.
Which is hilarious, because when I was a teenager, you were just starting a blog. Do you remember this? On Tumblr.
Yes.
Of all things. And, man.
It is no longer there.
Right. But I remember those days of you just starting out, just starting to write, just starting to do that. And then now looking at you where every single post that you're doing with the church and different things, it's super well-spoken, you know, the things that you went through with the college and different things of that nature, the skills you learned, even though you're not majoring or doing what you went to school for.
Yes.
It's amazing how God uses that. And I think, you know, one takeaway from this podcast is that oftentimes it does take the death of a dream for new ones to come alive.
Yes, and it's kind of that, like, as cliche as it is, the phoenix from the ashes that rises.
Totally.
It's this rebirth of something where you have all of these skills and all of these things that you've learned. And obviously, like, to a certain degree, I think through my life, I'll do some kind of youth ministry, just in who I am as a person. Like, I love teenagers. I don't know that I'll ever come back on the team full time, but I love teenagers. Awesome. I love working with them. I love that I still get to connect with the teenagers that I've worked with that are now adults and the teenagers that I worked with at CASA that are still very much in the teenage or young adult years.
Absolutely.
And see how they're changing and growing and maturing in these amazing, crazy, insane triumphs in their life. And getting to interact with new teenagers. And now, obviously, I'm in a season of my life where I have a preteen in my household, which is a terrifying prospect. He's newly 12, so that's still new in my heart. But getting to see all of that kind of breathe, and then seeing how my life and everything that was the dream of youth ministry has kind of shifted, where as youth ministry, like I wouldn't be, doing this 3 days a week youth ministry. Like that's not the capability of most churches. But I have a unique ability to kind of see and give insight into different things in the position I'm in now as director of marketing.
Yep.
While still like I get to manage your guys' social media that I'm taking over, and I get to interact with the teens, and I get to interact with Brandon as a youth pastor and kind of feed some of the random tips and tricks.
Yes,
there we go. That I learned doing youth ministry and working with CASA that I don't know that I necessarily would be able to do if I was on staff, because it's a different dynamic.
Absolutely. 100%.
And it's just knowing that dreams and passions change and bubble up differently in your heart as seasons go through.
Yeah.
I think is a big thing that isn't talked about in the church.
I agree wholeheartedly.
They talk about, okay, you'll have new dreams. They don't talk about the death of previous dreams and what that can look like for the new dream. My husband and I now are opening our own marketing business. That's what I'm doing full time. I went full time independent contractor a few months ago, which is terrifying.
So exciting though.
But so exciting. It freed me up in a way that, like, I've obviously done the social media for the church for a long time. But it actually freed me up from a regular 40-hour-a-week job to be here in the building 3 days a week.
Absolutely.
Actually meeting with our directors and meeting with our pastors and meeting with everybody to really start walking out the beat of Garden Valley in a ministry perspective that I've never been able to do before, because
new capacity.
Yeah, the capacity. And I was always looking at, here's my 40-hour-a-week job to facilitate doing youth ministry. Whereas this is, here's my probably 60-hour-a-week job, because it's an independent contractor and you're in business for yourself. But here's your job that elevates your ministry.
Right.
And it's a very different dream and heartbeat and passion that, like, I want teens and youth pastors to know that your dreams may change and shift, and you may feel this grief of like something's dying. It's not so much a grief so much as this is pain and readjustment of rebirth.
Absolutely.
And there will always be pieces of that you're walking out in a new season and in a new dream, and not to get discouraged, because I also am a firm believer in this season of youth ministry is over for me. I don't know that there's not going to be another season that comes up in the future.
Right. Absolutely.
Or that it may not look like traditional youth ministry. So that's kind of where my perspective is with dreams and visions and passions and walking those out. Like, it's, you dive after what God's calling.
Yeah.
Don't hesitate on it. Like, don't stay in a job that you hate just because you think you need to. I think the door probably would have closed on my youth ministry time a lot sooner. I probably wouldn't have had to go through something quite as intense as I did with CASA. It was...
Yeah, right.
But I also, like, I gained some amazing connections there.
And tools.
And I gained some amazing community connections as well, like, absolutely, that I never would have been able to before. Like, there's no way I would have been able to. Like, I text regularly with some of our city council members. Like,
that's exciting stuff. I have that.
I work in a church. Most of our church members do not text with city council members.
Yeah, totally.
And that's fine and great. But Like without being a part of CASA and that person being a part of the board, because that person was not on city council at the time.
Yeah.
There wouldn't have been that connection, and that person was very open and blunt and honest and wanting to be on the ground at CASA, working with the teens and working with the staff. And
Right.
so I got to know that individual very well. And like Flower and I still regularly meet up with her and talk with her. Flower talks with her probably daily, but it's just, don't get discouraged in those times.
Absolutely.
And it's really easy to do, clearly, because I spent 6 weeks crying. But rest easy on the peace that God has it handled, and that a new season is being cultivated and blossomed for you. I'm not great with plants, but that the gestation period where it's growing for you, you just may not see all of the roots that are starting to be placed for you.
Right.
And I did. Left CASA, ended up getting another job, spent another job at a real estate office for a year. Loved it. Got some amazing, crazy connections there. Transitioned out of that, went to a title company. Again, how I manage that trajectory to marketing, like, who knows? But I went to a title company, have like some amazing friends that I got from the people that I worked with there. And then in January, February, somewhere in there, left that job. I got laid off there because obviously the housing market is changing. I changed that, and then Donovan and I were in a new season of, okay, like, God's clearly saying something to us.
Yeah.
What is he saying, and where do we want to go with it? And I mean, I was blunt. Like, I was super blunt. Like, I emailed my mom and Pastor Sean and went, okay, God's given me a very clear deadline of this date. I need a decision on what I'm doing by this date. I had a job offer on the table, and the other option was going through and taking this marketing position, and a couple other things. But this one meant going full-time independent.
Amazing.
And Sean came through for me, which was, I did not expect. I did not expect, because it was a very short time span, like it was 3 or 4 days, and Pastor Craig was out of town.
Good time.
So God does crazy things for the passions that he has placed on you and the dreams, and he'll make passions in you that you never have seen coming.
That is a fact.
Like, I hate social media. I don't like what it does to our society as a whole.
I agree.
But I also, like, I've had conversations with people. I'm a firm believer that social media and digital marketing has to be an integral part to what you're doing in your church.
And it can be used for good, which is a whole nother podcast for another time.
Yes. And I think you have someone else speaking on that one, right?
I do.
Good. But yeah, it's just, don't get discouraged. There were a lot of times I got discouraged. There were a lot of times where I was bluntly honest with the teens walking through this unknown season of my life that was my youth ministry years. I was unmarried. I wasn't dating, like, at all. I was a single mom, and my life was this insurance gig that I wasn't sold on for the rest of my life, and youth ministry, and my child. Don't be scared walking through the unknowns, and don't be scared to step into what God's calling you. When he called me out of youth ministry and called me out of insurance, I should have taken that step. Like, he called me out of Sean Bowles spoke a word that I was not meant for sales, like 4 years before I stepped out of insurance. And I didn't make the step.
Yeah.
Because I was scared of the unknown. I was scared of that unknown season, unknown of what it would do to my life. I was terrified of what my identity would be without youth ministry.
Right.
Like,
absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Who was I? Who was I to the church? Sure. And for a season, I was in the background. Like, I did a few things background wise, but that was it. And it was refreshing. It was refreshing, and it set me up for moving into Casa. And then I left Casa and had Addie, and life changed, and it's a whole different level of joy and happiness. And I like waking up and coming here every day.
Come on.
Like,
I love it.
I actually like talking with you guys every day.
It's fun.
I don't want to throw pens at people.
Some days.
And I haven't run into it yet. It's just, it's crazy insane. Keep in mind, I did, however, deal with real estate agents for 2 years.
Yeah.
So
it's a different level.
and most of the real estate agents in our area are pretty awesome, but there are definitely some that I'm like, they grate on nerves.
Yeah, right.
And then just people, like the people factor. But it's just
Working with people.
coming here is a joy, and it's something that I didn't really think that I was going to get from a full-time job.
That's great.
And a lot of people, I think, feel like they aren't going to get that in their full-time job, their 40-hour-a-week thing. They're not going to have this passion in their regular job. It's just going to be their ministry that's on the side that they don't get paid for.
Yeah.
And God can work crazy, insane, incredible things that you just can't even fathom how he managed to work it.
Yeah, in the background, there was
Yeah.
always a plan, and even though we may choose left or right or straight or backwards, there's still a plan.
Yes, and he still has a very clear path laid out for you to walk.
And even if we fall off the path, there's other routes and other ways that get us back home. And I think that's the most amazing thing about God is, in the last podcast we were talking about Romans 8:28, but God really does. He makes it work for our good. If we're called according to his purpose, he makes it work together.
Yes. I don't think my path was path A.
Sure. Yeah.
My path was probably more like path W so far. Because I did a lot of weird trajectory changes, and I made a lot of decisions that I knew better. Like, I grew up in the church. I knew better.
Sure.
But it's just something where, like, God just worked it. Like, he shifted things around. He made things happen to get me to where I am now.
Man, I love that. That's
and
so
it's
good.
insane.
Yeah.
Like, it's insane thinking about where I was 10 years ago at 21.
That's amazing.
I was probably buying you guys tacos.
On Taco Tuesdays, I remember. It's awesome. It's taco time.
Yes.
Man, well, Emily, thank you for sharing that.
Of course.
It's amazing. I think that with this episode, it was really good. I have a feeling there's going to be a part 2 because there's more to kind of unpack. And so all that to say, thanks for listening to the Youth Culture Podcast. I want to thank Emily for coming on here and
Of course.
having this conversation. It's really amazing, hearing from a business standpoint, also from a ministry standpoint, and someone who grew up in the church, had some experiences walking through that vulnerability, walking through that, and the tools and the things that you learned. And I think that it's one of the most amazing things about hearing your story is that even though you went through hard times and you went through things that pressed you, you still have come up on top. And now you're doing something that you never thought you'd be doing.
Oh, God, no.
And I think that's a testimony, just how amazing it is that God really can find ways and has a way and a path for us to walk through. And so if you're listening to this podcast and you don't know God, maybe you don't even have a personal connection with who God is or the God of the universe that we're talking about, I think that this is an amazing topic and conversation. Just hearing Emily's story and her testimony of what she's gone through, to see that God is real and to see that he really cares for our dreams and he really cares for the passions in our heart. And the moment that we choose to let go of our own dreams and allow those dreams, our own self-gain, to die, so to speak, we can see that God really does have a way of bringing new things to the surface that maybe have been within us this entire time if we maybe had stopped and listened or maybe chosen to walk that path. And so I'm just very grateful for Emily coming on here and talking about that. And so we'll see you guys in another episode. Thanks for joining us for the Youth Culture Podcast. we'll see you soon. All right. Peace.
Thank you so much for joining us today. If you're interested in checking out more of our podcasts as they come available, please download our app in your device's app store or check us out on your podcast platform at Garden Valley Church. We look forward to seeing you next time.